dears, I'm Lisbeth R. Jimenez and I am a published American mangaka. For those of you who didn't see my last video, I showed you guys my basic drawing process and how I also ink my illustrations. So if you want to see the making of this illustration that I'm about to color, please check out that video and get some helpful tips and tricks from me. I hope you'll enjoy it, guys. I usually draw very large, very intricate illustrations and even use up to 100 colors and like 3 different mediums to complete one drawing. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'll be drawing something much smaller and much more simple so that you guys can follow along. In order to choose the colors I want to use for my illustrations, I usually make a photocopy of my line art and with color pencils start dabbling with the colors and create a bit of a color study. But because this drawing is going to be so simple and there isn't any kind of like items or furniture in it, I just went ahead and made little like stick figures of the character's pose and began to do a color study directly on the sketch. I wanted this to be a goodbye to summer illustration, so she's wearing a bathing suit and is putting on a sweater, and all the colors, as you can see, are kind of like autumn colors, greens, reds, and yellows. I really recommend you guys doing this because sometimes we start to color our illustrations and halfway through the colors don't work out, so this will actually save you a lot of stress. So definitely try this out. Even with a photocopy, it's a really good idea. So by the time I did all 3 of these color studies, I decided that I didn't want just one color study to be used. I wanted to actually use the colors in both the first and the third color study. I liked the yellow in the first one and the pink in the other one, so I decided her sweater will be both pink and yellow, and that her bathing suit will 100% be a type of teal green. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm applying the very first color of her skin, which is the base color and is the lightest color. A very important thing for you guys to keep in mind when choosing colors for the skin of your characters is to try your best to choose about 3 colors minimum. One being the lightest, the second one being the medium color, and the third one being the darkest color you're going to use, which will also be used as the shadows. So as you see here, I applied the lightest color first and then went in with the medium color in order to blend them in together. A very helpful thing to keep in mind, guys, is that Copic markers, like all markers, are what they call a wet medium. Color pencils are a dry medium, markers are a wet medium, just like acrylic paints and watercolors. So in order to have your colors blend in together a lot more seamlessly and without any streaks, make sure that the color you applied onto your canvas or your paper is still wet when applying the next color. So again, in order to have a more streak-free coloring experience, be sure to make sure that the color on your paper or canvas is still wet when applying the next color. As you can see here, I'm going in with the darkest color and kind of layering it in the areas where I want it to be the darkest. So you see that? Once the markers are nice and dry and blended together, I go in with the darkest color to make more, I want to say, sharper, more defined shadows under her chin, between her thighs, under her breast, and of course in her ear. And now I'm coloring in her little knees, and I'm going over them with the medium color in order to blend out and soften the shadows. You see what I'm doing there, guys? A lot of possibilities. As long as your colors are still wet on the paper, you can pretty much blend in any color with any color. It's really amazing. So don't be afraid to experiment, okay? For those of you who didn't watch the first video, I'm actually coloring a little illustration of one of my own original characters from my published manga. Her name is Vandella, and she appears in volume 3 of the series, so I'm not going to say too much about her because it might be a spoiler, but know that I absolutely love her, and I just needed to draw her for this illustration. I hope you'll check out my manga on my site so you can learn more about her and the other characters in my series. So far, I've got her skin down. So far, so good, right? So now I'm going to start coloring in her hair. She's blonde, so I'm going in with a nice warm yellow. Notice how I'm not coloring over all of her hair. I'm leaving some areas white because those areas are going to act as the highlights and shine of her hair. You can always apply more shine after you're done using some white ink or white gouache or acrylics, but it gives it a really nice soft shine to the hair if you avoid some areas and don't color over those areas, so keep that in mind. I'm going in with some medium colors and a light brown for the shading in her hair. Blonde hair isn't just yellow, it can have a lot of different hues to it, browns, grays, so don't be afraid to add some color. But remember, don't go too heavy on the shadows because then she'll just become a brunette, which is not bad unless your character's supposed to be blonde, you know? Notice how I'm going in with even some darker browns in areas like between her thighs. And that I'm using right there is a blender. I don't use it for blending, I actually use it as a marker eraser. The alcohol in the blender, if you're very careful, can actually remove marker ink from areas that were not supposed to be a certain color, like when you accidentally color outside the lines, you can actually use a blender to erase that. So now I'm coloring in her bathing suit, and just like her hair, wherever the light is hitting it most, where there's highlights and shine, I kind of leave it white. Adding in the medium colors, so you see that? I avoided coloring some areas so that it can be a nice highlight. I'm doing the same for her bathing suit, putting down the lightest color first. Her shoes are going to be the same color, so I'm coloring them the same base color, which is the lightest green I'm going to use. Going in with the medium color while the color on the paper is still wet, so it blends in a little better. And again, going in with the blender to erase a bit of the ink that I did not want there. You could even use the blender to add some extra highlights because, again, the alcohol in the blender eats away marker ink. So it's actually really useful for more things than just blending. So now I'm adding in some of the shadows in her shoes. More shadows in her shoes. It can be a little intimidating for some people coloring in such a tiny area. So take your time. Okay, here she is so far. All we need is the heel of her shoe and her sweater. So again, if you remember my color study from earlier in the video, I decided I wanted to be both pink and yellow. So I'm adding the yellow first, and I decided to use the pink as the highlight color, which can be very difficult for some people at first when they're first learning to color with markers, but believe me, with a little practice, you'll be able to figure out how to blend in just about any color into each other. Remember, this is a wet medium, so as long as the marker ink on the paper is still wet, you can pretty much go in with any color and blend them into each other. Just be careful as you do that. You don't want it to become too muddy or something. Notice I'm going in with the pink marker to blend in the yellow into the pink. Now I'm going in with the yellow. The yellow I'm using as the shadow and the medium color, if you can see, while again the pink is the highlight. Now I'm going in with one of her skin tones and adding some deeper shadows. It actually works out. It almost gives it a sunsetty type of look, which is actually a really nice effect when you think about it. Again, this is supposed to be like a goodbye to summer illustration, so it's like the sun is setting on summer. This was actually a lot of fun to color. I love doing weird combinations like this. It's so much fun. And again, going in with that skin tone, well, her skin tone, like a peachy brown color, and adding in some more deep shadows. I waited until the ink was nice and dry on the paper before going in with this color so that it wouldn't blend too much, because I wanted it to be more sharp and defined. I didn't want it to be super soft and blendy. So keep that in mind. You'll get a different look on your paper depending on if the marker ink is dry or still wet on the paper. So there you go. So far, guys, she's almost done. And at this point, I decided to add a little yellow to her bathing suit because remember I said it kind of looked like the sun was setting on her? So I decided that by adding a little yellow to her shoes and to her bathing suit would kind of give it more of a look of the sun setting. So now I'm adding some shadow to the heels. And I'm coloring in the water in her water bottle. Very simple, just some blue. Nothing too fancy. And then I'm going over it with a light purple. Now I'm doing that because I wanted it to be like the water bottle itself was made of a purple plastic. So doing that will make it look more translucent. And now with a red pigment liner, I gave her some red nails. So it kind of goes with the orangey red shadows of her sweater. So it goes really well. Adding a few more shadows there to her hair. Again, be careful, you don't want to make her brunette. A little bit of it on her tongue. And now I'm adding a pink color to her cheeks and going in with some of her skin tones to blend it into the rest of her face. This is a really tricky technique. You don't have to use markers for the blush. You can actually use a little bit of red color pencil or pink color pencil or a Q-tip and a little bit of pastels for the cheeks. We're almost done, guys. The very last step is to add some white ink highlights. Now I use white gouache for this. It's a type of illustrator's acrylics, but it's very high quality. Some of them can be a bit expensive, but if you watch my video on tools of a mangaka, I will tell you about a number of brands you can use, and some are more expensive than others, so please check that video out. So I'm using this to kind of add a bit of highlight and depth to her clothing, as well as shine on her nose, her lips, her eyes. So it really makes it pop, I feel. I think it adds something really special to the illustration. So don't be afraid to play around with white ink highlights. There isn't just one way to apply highlights, there are numerous ways. If you draw a lot of fabric, you ask your friends to pose for you, you study fabric, you'll find out that the light actually lands on fabric in a lot of different ways. So it's really fun to experiment with. A lot of people use things like gel pens, but honestly I don't like using gel pens. They're not archival, which means they don't stand up to the test of time. They flake off, they fade. Things like gouache, oil paint, acrylics, those things are archival, acid-free, and are made for illustrators, so they will actually survive far longer than anything that you can buy at Staples, like a gel pen. So try your best to use actual paint and illustrators' white ink for such things, okay guys? Use the proper materials. I also used this white ink for her hair. So you see that, guys? Really makes it pop, right? So that's it, guys. This is my basic process of creating an illustration, coloring an illustration. You guys really asked for it, so I made it for you guys. So I hope you really appreciate it and that it was really helpful for you guys. Be sure to visit my website, sacredthemanga.com, to read chapters of my manga for free. Please follow me on social media so that you can see my artwork every day. And be sure to like and subscribe for more tutorials on how to make your own manga, how to get published, how to draw, and all sorts of crazy life experiences that I go through as a traveling artist, as a published author, and meeting my readers and meeting all sorts of really awesome people on the road and a few creepy people. You'll learn all about it through my vlogs. So until next time, guys, I'll see you here Thursday. Take care, God bless, and don't be afraid to nerd out. Bye, guys.